Hello everyone, I am Dr. R. Krishnaveni, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce Bank Management, St. Joseph's College of Arts and Science, Kadalur. In this video, we are going to cover meaning, sources and process of risk. First, sources of risk. So, what is sources? That is, sources, factors or indicators of risk. ஸோ அதாவது எப்படி இருந்தால் அதை நம்ம ரிஸ்க்குன்னு சொல்லுவோம்னு சொல்லிட்டு ஃபர்ஸ்ட் பாயிண்ட் டிசிஷன் ஆர் இன்டிசிஷன்ஸ் தட் இஸ் டேக்கிங் ஆர் நாட் டேக்கிங் எ டிசிஷன் at the right time is generally the first cause of risk. Suppose a banker takes deposits and decides not to put money in statutory liquidity requirements. The bank would be called upon to pay penalties. Indecision means in selling a government security. Indecision in selling a government securities or bonds when the market is rise is also a risk as it causes loss of revenue. The risk of revenue loss is on account of indecision. Then second one, business cycles. There are certain exposures that are affected by seasonality or business cycles. Lending to, for example, lending to sugar industry in India, disregarding the fact that the production of sugar is restricted to 6 or 7 months in a year, may give rise to risky situations. ஸோ அதாவது சுகர் இண்டஸ்ட்ரியில் 6 or 7 மந்த்ஸுக்கு ஒர்க் நடக்காது, அதுதான் உங்களுக்கு ஆஃப் சீசன்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. ஸோ அப்போ லோன் கொடுத்துருந்தாங்கன்னா அந்த பீரியடில் ரெக்கவர் பண்ணுறது உங்களுக்கு டஃப்பாக இருக்கும், ரிஸ்க்காக இருக்கும். ஸோ அதனால் இதுவும் ஒரு ரிஸ்க்குக்கு ஒரு ரீசன் அப்படின்ட்டு. ஸோ நெக்ஸ்ட் ஒன், எக்கனாமிக் ஆர் ஃபிஸ்கல் சேஞ்சஸ். The government's economy and taxation policies are sources of risk. The levying of import duty on certain capital goods can escalate the funding cost and bank finance requirement. The changes in government policies can impact the cash flow for the borrowing customer, thereby limiting his repaying capacity. The next one, market preferences. Over the years, the consumer demands and preferences, particularly from the youth segment, are changing substantially. The preference for a motorcycle over a scooter is an example. So, political compulsions. A government may force the banks to lend in areas where the rewards may not be proportional. Next, regulations. So, the impact of change in regulations, that is provisions, is similar to changes in government policies. For example, in developed countries like the USA, there are certain anti-boycott laws prescribing restrictions. So, the anti-boycott laws specifically refer to boycott involving one foreign government against another foreign government and participation of people in the US in those boycotts. With the passing of US Patriot Act, the processes for anti-money laundering have been strengthened. Compliance of a variety of regulations is also a source of risk. So, அதாவது நிறைய லாஸ் இருந்துச்சுன்னா ஸோ அதுவும் ஒரு டைப் ஆஃப் ரிஸ்க் அப்படின்ட்டு. So, next one, competition. In order to remain competitive, banks assume risk for enhancing the returns. In the quest to achieve their better result, there could be a tendency to assume risk highly unrelated to the return. The selection of the right counterparty, lack of proper risk assessment, failure to appreciate the borrower rating, etc., all contribute to risk acceleration. Competition remains a major source of risk for banks as for all other sectors. Technology. Technology is both a solution and a cause of risk. Deals worth millions are made in treasury at mind-boggling speed thanks to advanced technology supports. The process of maker and checker is scrupulously followed while entering into such deals. Still, machines can go wrong. The reflection of inaccurate values like dates, amounts, interest rate, etc. can cause a huge risk. And the last one, non-availability of information. Technology is an enabler for decision support for rational and data-based decision making. More often than not, in the absence of information support, banks do take decisions. The banks fix exposure limits per party or per industry. Exposures exceed these prudential limits in the absence of real-time information, thereby multiplying the risk exposures. In reality, in simple ways, the risk drivers and the risk indicators are changes in external environment include regulatory aspects. Regulatory means government rules or banking regulation, etc. Deficiency in systems and procedures. Errors either intentional or otherwise. Inadequate information and absence of required flows. Unsuitable technology supports. Communication gap or failure. Lack of leadership. Excessive and unreasonable incentive. So, lack of supervision of lending investment activities, lack of specific lending or treasury policies, lack of code of conduct, and lack of separation of duties, lack of accountability, lack of independent members of management and our board, and too much emphasis on earnings at the expense of safety and soundness, high rate, high risk investments. Underwriting criteria allowing high risk loans. So, tax policies on payment of checks, accounts, uncollected funds, and etc. So, next one, process or steps or stages of risk, that is risk process. First steps in risk process, identify the risk. To properly identify risk, bank must recognize and understand existing risk or risks that may arise from new business initiatives. Risk identification should be a continuing process and risks should be understood at both the transaction and portfolio levels. Second step is categorize risk by risk profile. Risk profile is important in deciding the probability and incidence of risk. The profiling should be done carefully. Third step is anticipating the direction of the risk. Direction of risk is the probable change in the aggregate level of risk over the next 12 years, and this category is decreasing, stable, or increasing. If the risk is decreasing, aggregate risk should decline over the next 12 months. If the risk is stable, the aggregate risk should remain unchanged. If the risk is increasing, aggregate risk should be expected to be higher in the next 12 months. Next one, establish and implement system to monitor risk. Banks should monitor risk levels to ensure timely review of risk positions and exceptions. Monitoring reports should be timely, accurate, and informative and should be distributed to appropriate individuals to ensure action when needed. And last step is procedure to control the risk. So, banks should establish and communicate risk limits through policies, standards, and procedures that define responsibility and authority. The limit should be tools that management can use to adjust when condition or risk tolerances change. Banks should have a process to authorize and document exception or changes to risk limits when warranted. Thank you. In our next video, we have to learn about Basel norms 1, 2, 3.